Good evening and welcome to another edition of the HCC Experience. It's our opportunity to acquaint our viewing audience, the local community, with some of the personalities at Hutchinson Community College and some of the programs and some of the activities at our institution. This evening's guest is Ken Berger, and Ken is the radio station manager at Radio Kansas, and it's good to have you here, Ken.
I appreciate it. I always like getting out and chatting about the things I love, and Radio Kansas is certainly on that list there.
You have been with the station for some time, quite a veteran of Radio Kansas.
That's true, that's true. I started as a HCC/Hutchinson Community College student in 1982 when the station was located on campus upstairs in Lockman Hall, and was lucky enough to be a part of our big move to Davis Hall now at 9th and Walnut, and I've seen the station grow in a lot of other ways too.
So you were a student in 1982.
I was.
When did the radio station start, Ken?
1979.
1979.
1979, we started as a National Public Radio affiliate. About in 1979, there was a big rollout by satellite of National Public Radio programming. Primarily news products, but it's also grown into a lot of entertainment programming, other things that people tell us they just couldn't live without.
So in 79, was NPR a relatively new phenomenon, or had it been around for a while?
It had been around since the early 70s, and I'm not the person to talk about that early history, but it was distributed by phone lines to a lot of stations throughout the United States. But when it came time to put it on satellite, it kind of made sense to offer it to even more stations, because once you have the one satellite, it can go anywhere you like.
You know, when it was upstairs in Lockman Hall, it was kind of limited as far as growth and expansion and the capability of the station, technologically as well as physically.
And in about 1984, 1985, the nursing program at Hutchinson Community College wasn't as robust and strong as it's become, and we had an opportunity to move into Davis Hall when that space was relatively unused. We came in, knocked out a bunch of walls, and made some special purpose spaces specifically for radio. If you come up there today, one of the first things you'll notice, obviously, is all the acoustic foam like you see on every radio set, from, gosh, if you remember Hee Haw and all the egg crates on the walls, to WKRP, to Frasier. You kind of have a feeling for what a radio station looks like, and the station is very similar. A lot of the same types of equipment, from microphones to tape machines. Of course, it's all on computer now, and we spend most of our days, we'll sometimes admit, in Microsoft Office, doing database work and all the sorts of management that keeps any business running.
You know, Ken, we were talking about the move that took place. And I know that the station does a lot of fundraising for its survival. And one of the provisos in that move over to Davis Hall, and the third floor in Davis Hall was used primarily for storage. There wasn't much in there, and those people familiar with Davis Hall, that was formerly the nurses' school and dormitory. When it was tied directly to the hospital, to the south. I think then in the late 70s, I believe it was, diploma nursing programs kind of went away, and we developed that nursing program. So that's kind of the location of where we are and all. That was one of the rules, wasn't it, to move over to Davis Hall, that you had to have enough money to make that move take place? We
did, and my recollection, again, I wasn't involved. I was still a part-timer back then. Again, lucky enough to have some of the hands-on duties in building the place we're in now. But my recollection is about $250,000 in addition to our normal operational funding for that couple of years. And so it was really an ambitious project. And ambitious not just on the part of our founding general manager, Dave Horning, but really ambitious on the part of the community to be able to step forward and do that. We didn't have to take on long-term loans like we've seen other stations have to do. The community stepped forward, and when I say the community, I mean the larger community in south central Kansas that was served by that first station, KHCC.
What kind of service did that radio station provide? What was the geographic area that it served, Ken?
Well, we have been since 1979 a 100,000 watt station. That's the maximum electrical power that the Federal Communications Commission allows, and that's just west of the Mississippi. That 100,000 watt station was located on the KWCH tower at 1,100 feet. And so we could just about get to the Oklahoma border and get just as far north of here. The Wichita area has always been fairly well served by that signal. And that signal, even by then, had evolved to being primarily classical music during the day, our National Public Radio news programs at drive time, morning, afternoon. And on weekends, we've always tried to present what we call public radio's signature variety programs, the programs that people would miss if they weren't available in this part of the world, and they're only available through public radio, like Prairie Home Companion and Car Talk. Car Talk wasn't yet.
You know, we have added 2 stations since our first venture into public radio. The first station was at Salina?
That's right. KHCD, strategically located between Salina and Manhattan to serve both communities.
What was the catalyst for that taking place, Ken?
That really was at the request of some listeners in Salina who strained hard to hear KHCC at 90.1 from Hutchinson. And they said to themselves, you know, we think there's room on the dial. Of course, that's for an engineer to decide, but would you undertake that for us? Would you look to see if a station could be placed in our part of the state, and would it be budgetarily feasible? Could you take this on? And because at that time there was more than there's gotten to be federal money available for such expansions, we were able to, with, again, fundraising efforts in Manhattan, in Salina, and with the help of the federal government, put another station on the air, and it's done very well for us, business-wise. The listener response has been about what we've expected, and we've been able to generate some other income with the site itself, and it's been a real success story.
So that expansion has taken us really from the border of Kansas now to the border of Nebraska.
That's right.
And it goes all the way east to Manhattan, roughly, right?
It does. About Council Grove is about the furthest east that signal is accessible, and as far west as Waukene now. When we added our third station, KHCT, it is a 50,000 watt station and is strategically located between Great Bend and Hayes. So that, again, there too, both of those
So we get
communities.
good coverage in Hayes as well.
And good coverage for our purposes actually is federally defined. There is a minimum coverage that allows us to say, yes, these people are served, and this is how they get public broadcasting.
Now, our station has primarily focused on classical music and news. Can I talk about why that particular niche?
It really seems to be what the community needs. You know, the first thing any radio station needs to be is a predictable resource for the community. And whereas maybe in the 70s, before our station even came on the air, the concept of public broadcasting may have involved a volunteer coming in for 90 minutes and playing polka music, and another volunteer coming in for 90 minutes and playing klezmer music or whatever. By the time 1979 rolled around and public broadcasting was really starting to mature, the notion was a public broadcaster identifies a need in the community, hopefully identifies the most common need in the community for audio programming. And early on, the thought was there needed to be lots of jazz on the area, and on the air in the area, and we had jazz on during the day. And because of market forces, meaning because of the things that other stations were offering at the time, the availability of listeners at that time and the type of listener at that time, by the time I arrived, actually, in 1982, the station had found that classical music was actually the way to go. And that's done very well for us. No surprises there at all. So we're now classical music from 9 in the morning until 5 every afternoon, a predictable resource, as I suggested. And then at about 5, when a lot of people are making changes to their day anyway, moving from the office to the car, from the house to evening activities, that's when we make a transition to an entirely different product, which is news from National Public Radio and All Things Considered.
So you have 2 major news segments during the day. You have All Things Considered, then you have Morning Edition. What is the, I guess, theme of those 2 broadcasts? How would you differentiate the 2?
Between the 2? Well, Morning Edition, I think, is more concerned with making sure you're up to date. They cover the headlines and maybe self-consciously cover the headlines that they know other news outlets are also covering. There's a big difference between commercial-free broadcasting, 2 hours of commercial-free news each morning and then repeated on Radio Kansas. Big difference between that and squeezing the same topics into a 30-minute newscast, or even think of watching a television morning news program where they might have a 5-minute newscast and then they'll have fluff. Self-consciously, public broadcasting attempts to do things that other broadcasters aren't doing. And so in the morning, again, it's headlines, but in depth, taking those stories in depth. In the afternoon, then, it's more, for all things considered, it's more a matter of really establishing a unique voice for public radio news, public broadcasting news, in that they tend to go deeper into stories that are matters of public policy. So whereas you and I will hear other broadcasters and other commentators of every sort hem and haw about what to do about, say, unemployment, they'll go in depth with the actual numbers, the actual root causes of some of these things on all things considered. And it's, again, lighter wouldn't be the right word, but more conversational than just narrative.
So news starts in the morning at 5 o'clock.
It does now start at 5.
5 to 9. And you have, how often do you replay that segment? Is it every hour?
The program is produced as a 2-hour program.
A 2-hour program, okay, so you replay it twice. And what about All Things Considered?
All Things Considered is produced starting at 3 o'clock our time, and we don't carry that first rollover, they call it, the first 2-hour segment, because again, the audience has identified classical music as appropriate right up until 5. But at 5 o'clock, we catch that first rollover. The program is refreshed continually, and from 5 to 7 on Radio Kansas, you get, again, for your drive, for your the period during which you're fixing dinner in the evenings or maybe out and about, you're getting that, again, that more, that news product that's a little more conversational.
Then at 7 o'clock to midnight, we have...
Well, from 7 to 9, we have classical music as presented around the world on a program that we call locally a little night music, but depending upon the night of the week, it might be anything from the New York Philharmonic to the Chicago Symphony to a European symphony. But the amazing thing there is that rather than grabbing another stack of CDs and bringing it into the control room and playing that for everyone, which has its own value, and we work hard to make sure that we're providing a unique community resource there. On those evening programs, we present those orchestras from around the world in performances recorded maybe 2 weeks ago, or in some cases even less than that. A couple of years ago, the New York Philharmonic went to China, and they made their performance available almost immediately over satellite. Really an extraordinary batch of programs.
So is that a satellite feed through public radio as well?
It's specifically, all of those programs come to us from WFMT in Chicago, which is really the classical music powerhouse in the United States.
And then at
9 o'clock, we're glad to present a program called Night Crossings. Night Crossings is contemporary instrumental programming. So we think of it
unique to Radio Kansas.
It's absolutely unique. It's our production. It was based, again, as everything is, based on a lot of the guidance of Dave Horning, our founding general manager, but it was also based upon the success that a similar format had had in Denver in the late 80s. The program started in 1986, so an entire generation of musicians in this area has grown up listening to Night Crossings. Night Crossings is, as I mentioned, it's contemporary instrumentals. We think of it, we tie it back to our daytime classical music because it really is original compositions by classically trained musicians. You'll hear a lot of piano, some cello, some wind instruments, a lot of guitar pieces, and really the best thing I can do is encourage you to listen anytime between 9 and midnight, Monday through Saturday.
You feature any local artists on that?
Oh, yeah, we play, on Radio Kansas, we play more Kansas artists than any other radio station anywhere. And that's kind of by design, but it's also due to the maturity of that program. again, a generation of musicians, including local musicians, have grown up listening to Night Crossings, and there are a lot of people who I wouldn't say replicate that style, because they're not attempting to replicate something. They feel that same style. There's a, you know, in talking about music in your own CD collection, you could wax philosophically all day on how you would describe it. But whatever it is that those musicians feel, they seem to hold something in common, and the selections really go very well together all night long.
You know, I would think that our local music community would really be excited about having that venue. Do you get quite a bit of support from them?
Well, we do. In fact, almost exactly this time last year, we, through a concert, brought several of these people together for a concert we called Night Crossings Live, and all the performers performed, you know, they had no business connection to the concert, and we weren't out to make any money either. And so again, it was one of those community efforts where they really were showing their appreciation, I think, to the station for that exposure. Great artists, like a lot of people see in this area, a gentleman named Trevor Stewart. He plays something called Chapman stick, which is basically an instrument that is all guitar fretboard. It's basically two guitar fretboards side by side with no body, and you play it by tapping the strings. It's a beautiful thing to see. A gentleman named Bruce Huss plays guitar. Bruce Huss has been a fixture on television for 30 years in this area. He used to work for KSN TV, and he's now primarily a musician, and so that's the passion he's pursuing. From right here in Hutchinson, Elena Orwell is a harpist who, again, she really feels this music the same way a lot of the other artists on the program do. She plays harp in Celtic styles, in styles that are reminiscent of Oriental styles. An amazing artist, and if you get a chance to see her locally, I would really encourage you to seek her out.
Ken, at this time I think we'll take a short break and hear more about other programs at Hutchinson Community College. Come back with Ken and learn more about Radio Kansas, perhaps some of the weekend activities, which are a little bit different than during the week. So at this time, let's go ahead and take that short break. Welcome back to the HCC Experience. I'm Ed Berger, president of Hutchinson Community College, and our special guest this evening is Ken Berger. Ken Berger is station manager at Radio Kansas, and we've been talking a lot about the programming that goes on from Monday through Friday. We know we have special programming on the weekend that takes a whole different approach than during the week.
Well, it really does. As I mentioned in the first segment, there are certain programs that people wouldn't consider us to be a real public broadcasting station if we weren't able to carry programs like a Prairie Home Companion with Garrison Keeler. Garrison Keeler was here in September. That was really exciting. We have a Car Talk with Click and Clack. People know them as the Tappet Brothers, any number of other pseudonyms, and they've had a newspaper column off and on through the years. So people come to public broadcasting seeking Click and Clack on Saturday morning from 9 to 10, and then hopefully we convince them to stick around for some of our other things. In fact, right after Car Talk on Saturday mornings, we have a program that's rising in popularity and may surpass both of those programs eventually. It's called Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, and it's a comedy news quiz, but like the rest of public broadcasting, it takes that deeper look at what's been going on in the news. Even the jokes themselves are a little deeper, and it takes a little while for the Twitter to make its way through the audience as everyone kind of gets the jokes. It's kind of a neat panel program. And then later on Saturday, a technology-based program called Tech Nation, which really originally started out at 6 o'clock on Saturday mornings. It had a lot of good positive response, but almost all of it was with a little elbow into our ribs that, boy, I love that program, but I almost never get a chance to hear the whole thing starting at 6 o'clock. So we moved it to 11 o'clock Saturday morning, which is a time when nearly anyone can listen, and it's been a solid performer for us there as well.
You know, it's then on Sunday we have kind of replays of some of those. Is that what?
We do, and that makes really good sense. In fact, it makes such good sense that I'll let out a little secret here. We actually get a discount from our network for replaying Car Talk on Sunday. And so at noon on Sunday, which is again a time we think nearly everyone can make time to listen, we rebroadcast Car Talk, follow that immediately with a rebroadcast of Pray Hum Companion. One of the reasons we would do that is because these programs are, by their nature, they're expensive to produce, and therefore they're expensive to purchase for Radio Kansas. We purchase almost all of that weekend programming. People, I think, sometimes forget that as a non-commercial broadcaster, we don't have commercial revenue. So even if a program is extremely popular, like Car Talk or Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me or Prairie Home Companion, the fact that we're presenting it to a large number of people is meaningless until we're able to ask those people to make a direct contribution to Radio Kansas to keep those programs on the air. And so broadcasting each of those programs a second time on Sunday gives us another chance to catch those people who may have honestly missed the program on a Saturday. They may listen normally on a Saturday, but the week that we happen to be asking for their help, they're out of the area or out of town or genuinely unavailable. So there's a real logic to it. It makes good sense. In fact, I think every station that does this suspects that more people are able to hear a Prairie Home Companion on Sunday, in our case from 1 until 3, than are able to make time for the program on a Saturday evening. It broadcasts live from the Fitzgerald Theater in downtown St. Paul on Saturday evenings from 5 until 7, but unless you're actually in the seat in the theater, 5 to 7 might be a stretch. Might be difficult to make time for that program, and that's why we hope you'll join us on Sundays if you can't on Saturday.
Would you say your listenership mostly is a automobile listener, the listener who listens to Radio Kansas as they're commuting from one place to the other? Or?
Well, that's one of the $64,000 questions. If we knew exactly what our mix of audience was, we could obviously tailor our services for them. I think a lot of the listening that takes place is done in the car. In other words, whereas you might join us for 2 hours of Prairie Home Companion or an hour of Car Talk at a time, over the course of a week, a lot of the services you derive from Radio Kansas or any other radio station are 7 to 9 minutes at a time in the car between places, getting that quick update. Or we're more than happy to accept listeners for any purpose, even if you're not consciously tuning to Radio Kansas for a specific product. The fact that we are simply an accompaniment to part of your day is good enough for us. We're just thrilled to be a small part of your life.
You're looking at my profile, and I'm not sure I'm much different than anybody else. We certainly listen to Morning Edition early in the morning, and then some of the All Things Considered on the way home. And then if I happen to be driving around, I catch the Saturday programming, but that's about the only time. I guess I'm not one of those people who sits at home, turns on the radio, and listens to the programming. Well,
demographically, your availability has a lot to do with which programs you hear. There are, I think disproportionately, our listeners to our classical music are in an office environment where they're maybe not as busy as you, in and out of the office all day long. Maybe they are at one workstation all day. They get a chance to listen that way. Or just as likely, and I think it is a 50-50 sort of proposition, they're retired folks for whom the classical music is background music. It's just a part of their lives. I remember sitting in a similar program in the Salina area, a television program where I had a chance to talk about our services, and the host of the program said, "You know, I listen to classical music during the day because it makes me feel like I live in a movie." And she's absolutely right. Classical music is really the background material, the emotional background sometimes of movies. And I think people feel that their lives feel a little more significant when they choose classical music as
That's really an interesting perspective. I had not even...
It makes perfect sense, but I'd never put that together myself.
No,
but she was really adamant about that. And one of the things we do now, and I have to admit, it's partially because of being informed by a listener. Almost everything we do comes from a listener's idea at some point. We do a program on Friday nights called Cinema Classics, where we feature classical music that you've originally heard, almost certainly have already heard, and you heard originally used in movies. And we give you a chance to hear the entire piece. So whereas you may have heard 30 seconds of something that was helping to emotionally underpin a pivotal scene in a movie, we let you hear the entire 30-minute piece. We let you hear the emotion wax and wane, come and go, and I think it's a real education for a lot of people.
What time is that on Friday?
It starts at 7 o'clock on Friday nights.
7 o'clock
It
Friday night.
alternates with the Wichita Symphony Orchestra broadcasts. The Wichita Symphony performs 8 concerts in the series that they allow us to record each year. We broadcast those twice. That's 16 out of 52 weeks we're doing the Wichita Symphony. But in the weeks where that broadcast isn't available, we do Cinema Classics.
Ken, I know that fundraising is an important part of what we do at Radio Kansas, listener-supported radio, and you're in the midst of a fall fundraiser.
We are genuinely in the midst, despite the fact that our on-air portion is only a week long. We invite people, starting many weeks before that, to make their contributions voluntarily. We couldn't exist without the support of the listeners who derive value from public broadcasting. There's a lot of misconception about how much funding we get from other sources and how much of our service is simply offered as a gift to you as a listener in this part of the world. Hutchinson Community College obviously provides important seed money for everything we do each year. Hutchinson Community College owns and operates Radio Kansas, but they can't do everything. We're lucky to be able to turn to the federal government, and proudly so. We receive money from competitive federal programs, meaning that this is money that's already been set aside. And if we compete successfully, we can bring the money to Kansas and serve you. If we don't compete successfully, that money will still go into public broadcasting, but in Illinois or Iowa or Montana. And so we're proud of the fact that we're able to bring this money to Kansas. But at the end of the day, the actual programming decisions, the money that it takes to purchase the programs, to present National Public Radio programs, it comes directly from the people who listen to the station.
If we have one of our listeners who would like to become a part of Radio Kansas, how would they go about making contact with the station and registering their interest in becoming a listener, a golden listener, or whatever?
Absolutely. Well, we try to make it easy. Years ago, when the 800 numbers were easier to come by, we were lucky enough to get a pretty good 800 number, 800 Radio KS, 800-723-4657. And give us a call. And you're absolutely right, there are suggested membership levels. Some of them have thank you gifts. We wouldn't be public broadcasting if it weren't for the tote bags and coffee mugs and things that we were able to offer. A golden listener is someone contributing $250. Very thankful to have people who think that highly of the station and can make that sort of contribution. Day sponsors at $365, but our most popular membership level is $10 a month, $120 over the course of a year. And if you were to take all those hours that you mentioned of listening to Morning Edition, listening to a few programs on the weekend, take all those, add them all up, you would find that our $10 request as a $120 member each year is really pretty darn reasonable. If you were to compare that to what your cable bill is and how much programming you use on TV, it's really the same model. And you've really already made the decision that it's worth about that much because of what you pay essentially voluntarily for cable. So in one way, you can just think of it as your audio cable bill.
There you go. Ken, thank you very much for joining us on the HCC Experience, and thank you, our viewers, for being with us again this evening, and we look forward to seeing you in another program next week. Thank you very much.